So basically the question is how your organization is using SharePoint. And the first is for publishing content, so like things like the internet, or for document management solutions, so things like including retention as well as classifications, and or if you're using it for file storage only, which is basically, putting a bunch of documents into the document library and just storing it and revisiting it from time to time. Or do you actually use it to collaborate with internal and external? Or do you actually use all of those, take advantage of all of those things that's offered?
I can let you know that 56% of people said all of the above.
Okay.
And
so that's 50. Yep, that's really great.
Yeah, and 20% was saying for publishing content.
Okay. Okay, so there's
nobody for file store management.
Okay. No, that's a really interesting it's a really interesting result. But at the same time expected, because we are with the M365 being the standard platform now, a lot of organizations onboarded, and the SharePoint is part of that, and the need to really start utilizing and optimizing all the features that are offered. As for those who are just dabbling into the publishing of content, as you can see, there's actually quite a lot more that you can do in SharePoint. As you can see, there's lots of features, and oh, someone else is coming. In terms of often what I find is that people aren't aware of these features to take advantage of. So as you saw the result, we do have a huge difference there, even though 50% are using and aware of some of these features to take advantage of, but then there's the 50 that's still getting across those features. So in terms of when a site is created, it automatically gives you a document library. And so within the document library, you can actually create custom metadata. So here's an example of, let's quickly go through that. So here's an example of a site that's been created, and the site has document library. As you can see that the standard metadata, so when I say standard metadata, it's basically data about data. You get things like the name, the modified date, modified by.
Sorry, we're just still seeing the SharePoint. How is SharePoint using your organization slide?
Oh, really strange, because I'm actually, so it must be really slow. I'm actually on a different slide now. It's lagging.
I can see the next slide.
I was seeing the right slide.
Oh, okay. Sorry, must just be me.
Yep. Oh, good. Yeah, so basically you automatically get a document library, and within the document library you can actually create custom metadata. You can also sort, group, as well as filter to improve the search experience. So for example, as I mentioned, the standard comes with these metadata, but as you can see here, I've given you an example here. I've actually created additional metadata custom to appropriate and the information that, all the properties that I need to describe, to provide more information about this, the documents that are within this document library. Over here is an example of being able to sort those metadata. So basically all these columns here at the top here, you can actually sort it in the order in which you want to display it. So as you can see that you can position, one is basically is what's going to be the very top, listing as at first, and then you've got second and third. So here's another example of me sort of, once I've done that sorting, the sorting occurs, as you can see, this has now changed at the top here. Okay, so another example is grouping by status. So so once you've got all your metadata in place, you can actually group it by pretty much any of the columns that is meaningful for your end users. You can create different views to meet different requirements. And so, for example, if you're someone who is responsible for keeping these document on track and pushing through, notifying the people that is responsible. You can sort or you can group it by status. So as you can see here, all the documents that are actually being grouped by status. Yeah. Another example of feature that's also available is filter. You can actually filter. So within your document library, you can also filter by, the subject matter expert. You can create, and if your document library has, a lot of documents and files, you can actually filter by, year. It could be that you're only wanting to see things that are from this year or 2014 if you've got documents that are created in 2024, sorry. Or you can also filter by status as well, as you can see. So often I see that what happens is when a site is created, the standard metadata is actually just left, and then they start to add documents into the document library without really realizing that you can actually add more properties to it, as well as sort it and create your views that are meaningful to your end users to help improve that search experience, as I've shown you the various ways of. So part of the SharePoint fundamental, you will, we go into more details, we walk you through the exercises, and you get to, play around the document library a bit more and, build that capabilities so that you can actually share that with your organization. As you know that if you're coming from an organization that works from file share, you have limited options to, capture data. It's either, the title, it's mainly the title, otherwise all the other properties are actually populated and you don't have that additional opportunity to add, the more customized metadata that's applicable to this document library. Okay, so then there's things like you can also create multiple document libraries. So as I mentioned to you, that when a SharePoint site is created, you automatically get a document library. Okay, so don't think that that's all you've got. And what I've seen in a lot of the people that I work with, they don't realize that you can actually create more document libraries. As you can see, I've actually created a few here that's, even though you can't really, it's not obvious, but these are actually document libraries, just to show that you can have multiple document libraries in a SharePoint site. Yeah. Okay, now did you also know that you can also create custom lists to keep track of things? So let me just go here. So what is a list in the first place in SharePoint? It's basically a collection of data that is similar to a spreadsheet or a database table. So basically it uses rows and columns to hold each of the data, as you can see here. So it's rows. So these are columns. So you've got course name, you've got course date, trainer. So each of these are columns, and the rows are basically, describes what these things are. So for example, this course is finance, and the course date is, this date here, the trainer is so and so. So again, I created this just to give you an example of how easy it is to actually create. Again, part of the SharePoint fundamental, you also get to create, your own custom list as well. You can actually create multiple lists, just like a document library. You can have as many lists as you want in a SharePoint site. So you could use it to track activities. You could also use it to display it like in a calendar. So either listed as a task or calendar, or as well as a discussion board. So for example, so this is actually a list, okay? And here is basically I created this list, right? This list here. Then I just changed the view. I want to view it based on dates. And so it presents it in calendar view. So as you can see, that instead of seeing it financed on, what is it? This is the 26th of the 4th. Here's a, so there's one here which is I think this date is actually, oh, it is April. The dates, yeah, the date, I think this is an American date, isn't it? That's why it's sitting out there. So I was like, why is it the 4th, 25th, 29th? So it's American date. So basically it's reflecting, you're presenting it in a different view. So you can do that as well. So anything that you associate a list with in terms of a date, you can change it to list view as well. You can also manage your data in this way so that you can keep track of, so for example, just going back to this, oops, sorry, just going back to, 1 second, just going back to this screen here, as you can see, I've got the status column with, you know, all the various things that are available. You can actually do things like you can set it so that it triggers. So if this is actually initiated initial review, you can actually use things like Power Automate to then trigger an email to be sent to the person responsible. So the beauty of lists is that you can also trigger event, and yeah, so this is again the beauty of using custom lists in your document library. The same goes with document library. In a list, you also can change the view however you want, as I mentioned, to meet your end user's requirement. You can set it so that there is a default view versus the view that you know, a collective group of people would refer to. You can create it and you can share it to these group as well. So as I mentioned to you, it's like a Excel or spreadsheet where it's basically, you know, rows and columns. And so it's really to help you keep track of things. So you can actually add a list at any point and you can modify them, you can hide them. You can also create alerts and you know, alerts in terms of what needs to happen next based on any of these columns that you have. So any questions around that? In terms of just sort of document library lists, the custom metadata that you're able to create, as well as the various views that you can create. Yeah.
There's some questions in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
By Anita.
Anita, did you want to take yourself off mute? Or did
Yep.
you? Oh, cool.
I'm off mute now. Got my camera on. Good morning. So Susanna, I think I get confused between, so custom metadata is a column, right? Is that the same thing?
Yes.
Right. And so I'm used to the older flavor of SharePoint, you know, SharePoint on-prem 2013, where, you know, we were all rampant with creating content types that had their own custom metadata. Does this mean in this release of SharePoint or later releases, we no longer need, like, does this alleviate the need for content types, or are they two different things?
They're really good question. They are definitely two separate things, and they
Right.
do, the content type has its own purpose.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in learning more about content type, that's actually covered in the, I think it's in the advanced super user, the super user SharePoint. But
Right.
basically the content type is where you can create and set up define metadata that you expect people to complete. So it basically creates a consistent capturing of metadata.
Yeah.
Whereas columns are
Mm.
basically, you know, anyone can create these columns. Obviously, as an as a site owner, you can lock this down so that you can actually only, you know, you create them. But it's just another way of doing it, basically.
Yeah.
And
So I guess it's more consistent across that library or site, is it? And you can actually force people to complete that
yeah,
metadata, right?
yeah,
And
and
another question, Susanna, can I don't like folders in SharePoint because they really don't hold much.
Yeah.
And you know, they're a little bit like file shares, I guess, or network drives that, you know. Can we add custom metadata to folders as well?
Unfortunately, if you create folders, it's
Mm,
basically another layer. And so whatever, as you can see here, unfortunately, I don't have a screenshot of that, but basically, if you have a layer folder, it does create a little bit confusion because
mm,
the metadata that you can see across here will also be across the folder as well.
mm,
Yeah, it's you are definitely right about that. You don't like folder. I don't like
mm.
folders either because it does. I mean, where we came from File Explorer, where people are
Yeah,
used to just folders after folders after
yeah,
folders after folders. But there's actually a better way of doing that, and that is get rid of the folders because you don't need it, right? Because as you can see, you can actually create custom view. View basically means you can view it and group it in however way that makes sense to the user to meet the user's need. The folder has its own restriction as well. So or personally, yeah, I stay away from folders. I just let when you have a document library, do it really flat, like in terms of go ahead and add documents in there and create all the columns that's needed, and then create the views that's going to be useful for your team, for individuals that are heavily working in this document library, instead of yeah, folders. Because as you can see, what will happen is there'll be a folder that groups all of this stuff, but the columns up here will still be displayed even on a folder.
yeah. Kind of
Yeah,
forms
so,
that barrier, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think people's behaviour and is deeply entrenched in using folders, like you said, because they're so
yeah.
used to that.
It's
Uh,
all comes back to education and training, I think. Yeah.
do I have time for one more?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So instead of folders, document sets, are they something that Microsoft's going to
Get rid
continue
of.
with in their roadmap? Yeah,
Yeah, really good question. They haven't
yeah.
really like spoken or written too much about it. It's still there. So
Mm,
it's again, document set and document type. Just quickly,
mm,
document type is good if you have templates, right?
mhm,
You've got a template. You set the metadata that needs to be captured part of that template. So like a contract, for example.
mm,
Yeah. Whereas document set is more like a case file where, for example, if you're creating an employee folder,
yeah,
right, you can use document set so that you set certain metadata that you can then share those metadata to the document, to the document. For example, employee name, employee number. It could be there's a special or the position. You want those key documents key information to also be shared on documents. So what that means is the document itself has these details. So there's never going to be that, misplace of documents. Make
yeah.
sense? Yeah. So
Yes,
they do have
definitely.
their purposes.
Yeah,
Yeah, but use it when it's necessary. Don't use
yeah.
it just because it's there, because there are some complications around when modification to them is required. Yeah, so use it for the purpose unless it's really valid. Otherwise, do it flat like this. It's a lot easier to change the view easily, to update easily. Yeah,
Thank you.
yep, good question. Anyone else? No? Okay. So why do you think so if Excel spreadsheet is similar to a list, why would you use one over the other? So why would you use because we came from Excel and now we've got lists in SharePoint. So why would we use one over the other? Has anyone had experience in using lists or started using SharePoint but decided to stay on Excel instead? No. So one of the limitations for lists is that, as you can see in terms of I'm just trying to go back to one. as you can see, the screen, the columns, you can only see so many columns. If you have an Excel spreadsheet that has lots and lots and lots of columns, right? That's why you would, that would be when you would use an Excel spreadsheet, is because you're able to capture a lot more details there and display a lot more details. Also in Excel spreadsheet, you can also do a lot more complicated formulas, whereas in a list, it's really, you know, simple. And it lets you track things, it lets you, you know, capture some of these metadata. But however, if you're looking at, you know, capturing, I don't know, if you can see there, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns, it's already at the end of the screen. So, you know, if you've got more, maybe more than 10, it's probably a bit, it's going to be a bit challenging for your end users. They'll have to keep scrolling across. So it might be a little bit annoying for them, and it might not be as efficient as working in Excel instead of less. Did I have a question? Did someone ask a question? Yeah. So Sue said, yeah, provide ability to, you know, for formulas. Yeah. The other one is need to print something out. You need Excel. You can actually export these and you can print it as well, the list. So so yes, in Excel you can print it, but also the list you can actually export and print as well. So that's a good point. Any other questions? No? Okay. So that leads us to another sort of key point that you learn in the SharePoint fundamental is when should you create a team site and a communication site? So for the people that have, remember that when we had the poll question earlier and there was 50% saying that you guys use, you know, SharePoint and all, you know, all of that, those features that were listed. I'd like to hear from those 50 people because, you know, it seems like you're using a lot more of the features. So when would you, have you come across where you've had to, you know, make a decision around, you know, when to create a team site versus a communication site? Yep. So I've got some answers in here. So got use communication site as a publishing site. Yep. Like an intranet. Yep. Use communication site as a hub. Yes. That's okay. Oh, good. Another one is use com sites for intranet. Yep. So that's the same answer. Yep. That is definitely really good. That is definitely, you would use a com site for publishing such things as for intranet. So when you go to create a site or even requesting a site, if you're not someone who can create sites, you really do need to think about the types of site that you want to create. So the two common options that you get is a team or communication. Now, again, in the fundamental course, you'll also learn and you'll also get to create and get, you know, a better understanding around the team site as well as com site. But basically, a team site is for managing digital objects. So, so let me just quickly go to the next slide to show you what that looks like. Here we go. Here is a team site. Now, how do we know that's a team site? Does anyone know? I've got some comments in here as well. Permanent structure where tighter control is needed. So got Anita saying communication site is for permanent structure where tighter control is needed and wider scope. Yeah. Teams for chat. Communication site for publishing. So do you do chats in team site? Set up team model prior to having metadata in Teams. Team site for collaboration, document management. Yeah. Teams site after the site name, Teams logo, icon next to. Yep. So how you know that this is a team site is it has a navigation on the left-hand side. That's the first bit. Yes, and the other bit is the logo that you get. Oh, here. See how you've got the little logo there? Yep. Yep. And how you know, so left, yep, so team site. And here is a com site. Your navigation is usually on the very top. So that's how you know the difference, okay? So just going back to my point, so team site is for managing objects, a digital object. So we're talking about documents, and so it has that left-hand side navigation. Com site is usually for publishing, so navigation is on top. And when you create a com site, you don't get a calendar or planner. And so it's really important to decide what is it that you need on your site. If you're going to do a site where you're going to, have events and you need to post dates and calendar and things like that, then you probably want a team site because you want to have the calendar and planner available. However, in a communication site, because it's a publishing sort of capabilities, it also gives you multilingual capabilities. So what that means is you can actually set it to translate to display in other languages as well. In a team site, you can't do that, okay? Again, the purpose of the com site is for publishing. So yes, so that's going to give you that capabilities. Now notice in both site, right, there is documents. That's actually the document library that comes as a default. So both of them have document libraries, okay? They also have site content, which is where you'll be able to access all your assets. So you'll be able to view all your asset. What I'm talking about is things like your document libraries, your photos, your image asset, pages. So that's where you would access all of those. So if you're managing records, now who here is managing records in using SharePoint? Yep, Anita. Anyone else? No? Oh, yeah. Got Heather. Yep, URL's different as well, definitely. Yep. But you have to have trained eyes to see to kind of pick that one up, definitely. Yes. Yeah. So if your organization is using the SharePoint to manage records, right? You definitely want to be managing, it in a team site, as there's more benefit because of the available options. You not only have calendars, you have also you have things like a mailbox that's a group mailbox that's also attached to it, and if you want members to have read access only, then you can update all the permission to read only. And if you want to create a team, an MS team, and associate it with team site, you can as well. Okay, so now we're talking about, so initially we're talking about team site. Okay, if you create a team site, you can at any point create an MS team to attach to it so that you can have, that interface where people are going in, they can chat, they can share documents, and messages. They can also set up channels and meetings that are attached to those channels. Recording of meetings that goes into those channels will then be saved into document libraries, that folders that are associated with that team site. Yeah. If you create a communication site, you don't have the option to create teams, in terms of you can't attach a teams at a later point. Okay. In terms of permission in a team site and a communication site, a team site is managed by M365 group. So what happens is when a team site is created, automatically there will be an M365 group that is created in the Azure AD, and people, the members are actually added, and you can actually use that group to also give them access to other services as well. Whereas in a communication site, it's actually managed using SharePoint group. So what that means is you actually have to add people to the SharePoint group in that site to give them access. Now, for both the team and SharePoint team and communications side, it starts off with no access, okay, until you add your members, okay. So, so part of the course, you get to go through step by step and learn the various requirements when you're creating these types of sites. Any questions so far? Yes, Michelle, you had a comment about having M365, especially if it's a shared tenancy, it does reduce your ability to manage records appropriately, because that you need to have an agreement between the various agencies that are part of that tenancy to to establish a standard governance, in order to then have that apply, because again, it's one system or one platform that you're using. You either apply the rules and it applies to all agencies, or but it is challenging. When you have one tenancy, you definitely need additional help to containerize each of the agencies' sites, so that policies can be applied, and that is, again, it would be through a third-party product. Any questions so far? Just going through. Yep, Anita?
So Susanna, can you, if you've set something up as a communication site, can you transfer it into a team site or vice versa?
No. Once it's, you'd actually have to
So
create
you,
one, and then, yeah,
so you
you
really
can't
need to make
convert.
that decision early on.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I find that organization really needs to do, is to have that provisioning in place where they provide the information, sufficient information and guide to end users who are requesting. If what is your intention of creating a site? Are you, what do you need to do in that site? And so what are the things that they can guide? For example, do you need calendars? Do you need a planner? Do you need a mailbox? Do you also need a team? If so, go ahead and create a team site. But otherwise, if you're wanting to just publish content to a group of people, and usually when you create a communication site, it's basically a small group of people who have write access, whereas everyone else will have read access. So they don't actually have much interaction with the content. They don't create and upload the content. It's usually that small group of people that will upload and create the content. Good question. Any other questions?
I think there's one there from Michelle, Suze, about segmentation.
Where are we? Yeah, that's it's not possible. You actually do have to get some help. Like in terms of natively out of the box, it's built for it's literally built for one to one. Unfortunately, I'm actually in similar situation as you, so we've actually gone to get help from third party to actually be able to do that. Another good question. But definitely that is a challenge when you've got that shared tenancy, for sure. Any other questions? So what are people, are you guys going into your document library and setting these custom metadata? Is anyone doing that? Gone into doing that, or have we just sort of just use what's default? Yeah, Pam, you're doing that? What's the challenge that you've identified when you create the custom metadata?
I guess we're still getting past, sorry, headset up. Still getting past the difference between using metadata versus folders.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's often a bit of a challenge, and people getting used to actually applying the custom metadata. And like the technique for doing it, if you like, the different ways that you can do it. And also, I suppose, the balance between having enough but not too much. Yeah. So.
Yeah, definitely. And just going back to the point that you made about enough but not too much, I've seen where they've created metadata where it's mandatory, and there's just too many. Like realistically, you got to look at what is really necessary, and really try to minimize it as much as possible. And because people get annoyed, so if you think about when a user saves a document into the file share, they really just, all the only information they have to provide is the title. So it's pretty straightforward. So then, working in SharePoint gives you the flexibility of capturing additional information, which is going to be useful and meaningful. However, don't go crazy, balance it, and say, okay, well, what is it that you really need? And also sometime making something mandatory right from the get-go could also be problematic because they don't have that information. So therefore they can't provide that information. So sometimes you might have to kind of leave that field, not mandatory. But then there are definitely some information or some metadata you should make mandatory in order for, especially the ones that you utilize to extract, to do reporting, that you rely on to set up things like, Power Automate to trigger certain action from, when things change. So yeah, again, it's really balancing that and not become annoying to your end users with all these, metadata, because you can set a lot of metadata. It's a good point there. What about Pam? So I just want to go back to, because you had your hands up when I asked the question about any challenges when you're setting up the metadata. So especially when you have multiple document library, what's your experience? So who here has actually set up multiple libraries in a site? Yeah, Anita. So what's the challenge there when you set up multiple libraries and you might want to keep the metadata consistent from one library to another? What's been your discovery?
And so I'm the non-technical person, but and again, my experience was with 2013 is that if you don't have the columns in all the libraries the same, moving documents can be a challenge. Also, the user experience. And the third, and when I say user experience, in that if they don't see the same thing and consistently, they might get a bit confused. But also, and I'm not sure if you can hide metadata or just keep it in the background, but sometimes too much metadata can also be a bit overwhelming for users.
Yep. So yeah, it just goes back to that point about, you know, when you set up a document library, think about what is necessary. Don't overdo it. That is definitely one key point. The other one is about when a document moves from one library to another. So what happens is if one library has, you know, 5 metadata that you've set up, 5 metadata columns that you've set up, but in the other library it has, I don't know, 10 or even 3. And so when you move the document from one library to another, you'll find that you're going to lose those metadata. So for those who manage or manage records using SharePoint, those are the kinds of challenges that you're going to get, that certain metadata aren't going to carry over. If let's say that you definitely, you know, the whole collection of a document library needs to move from one place to another, or a new document library for whatever reason, what you can do is you make sure that when you're setting the new document library up, you need to review the existing document library to see, well, what are all the metadata, what are all the values that's been set up, what are all the columns that's been set up and the values, so that that is also available and carry over. Because when you don't set the new document library up, you are going to lose some of those metadata. So just so it's just, this one is a little bit more advanced. Obviously the SharePoint fundamental just literally builds your capacity for, you know, like how you use, how you work and how you set up to your document library. But yeah, those are really good key points as well. Sue here has main challenge. Users have to become familiar with, navigation. We had a unique number for searching. Metadata needs to be the same. Yep. So if you're using it for managing records, definitely I would enable a document ID and give it its numbering. That would also help to bring up the whole collection. Yep. Pam here has template the old library to ensure all columns are the same. Yes, yes, you definitely need to do that before you move the actual document into the new library. It definitely needs to be the same, and it definitely needs to also have the same lookup values. So for example, if one column, you've got, you know, 5 things that people need to select from, those 5 things need to also be listed, be available as well, part of that lookup column. Otherwise, you're going to lose the values that were added in the old template. Yep. Yeah. Any other sort of questions? Yep. So Anita's got a question here. Is it possible to have legacy metadata columns retain existing data but prevent usage ongoing? Yes, you can. As you mentioned before, that you can actually hide the metadata. If you're not going to use it, you can hide it from, and in terms of making it, you'll find that especially if you've made it mandatory, it's you can switch it to make it not mandatory, but again, that's only going to be applicable for anything that is new. Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Okay, what else do I have here? Okay, so as I mentioned to you that the SharePoint fundamental covers things like, you know, document library, introduction to working with Page, as well as working with documents within document library. And for those of you who want to learn more and get more details around, you know, these information and have a go, you know, go through the exercise and build your capabilities, definitely do register for our fundamental course, and that's actually coming up soon. And as well as if you want to continue with your learning, we also have SharePoint for super users as well, which we will dive into the more advanced capabilities as well. All right. I think I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'll hand it over to I think it was, no, not Narelle. Carolee, are you there?
Yes, I sure am.
Yep.
Can you, I'm not sure if my laptop's got a bit of a lag, but can you just, there we go. So yes, I just wanted that slide there. So you'll see with, we've got a couple of QR codes there that show our Microsoft, we do an M365 catch up quarterly. So if you haven't joined those, try and jump on that. Even if you register for it, you can also receive the recording later on, so you can watch it at your own time. And then the other QR code at the bottom is just showing, as Sue's mentioned, the fundamentals course. We've got that actually running next week. We've still got a couple of places left on it, so we're happy to offer a 10% discount to anyone that joins. If you want to jump on that today and grab, I think we've got three places left. So if you join today, we will give you a 10% discount on that one. Yeah, so after that, the next slide, Sue, sorry. Another QR code. We're loving our QR codes. The marketing list there, if you want to jump on that, you'll get just updates on everything to do with what we've got coming up, any knowledge blogs and whatnot. And then the final slide just shows if you want to join the LinkedIn page or Twitter. So thank you all very much for joining today.